This all went down around 1999 or 2000, when I was about 19 or 20 years old. A good friend of mine swears this is the wildest revenge karma story he's ever heard and kept telling me I needed to share it. So if you've ever had your heart shattered by someone you loved and trusted, this one's for you. There's a TLDR at the end, but this ride's all in the details, and trust me, they matter. This story gutted me emotionally, and I think it'll hit others the same way. At the time, I was newly single after a 5-year relationship with my ex-boyfriend. For years, I'd quietly carried a torch for my junior high school crush, let's call him Dien Dukanol. I'd been holding on to that crush for 7 straight years, ever since we first met, and finally worked up the nerve to tell him how I felt. I figured since I'd left Alaska for good and was now living in the Pacific Northwest, what harm could it do? I wasn't planning to ever go back, so I thought, why not just say it, get my answer, and move on? Honestly, I was almost sure he'd either stop talking to me or say something awkward like, I don't see you that way. I expected nothing more than a slightly embarrassing conversation that would maybe explain some of my behavior around him over the years. But to my total shock, he felt the same way. He told me he had always had feelings for me, but never had the guts to say anything. He was scared of rejection, afraid he'd make a fool of himself, all the same things I'd felt. Hearing that completely shook me. For 7 years I thought this thing had only lived in my head, and now here he was, telling me he'd felt it too. After that call, my firm stance on never moving back to Alaska didn't seem so solid anymore. Maybe this was the relationship I'd been waiting for. Maybe I shouldn't throw that away. I had a great travel perk thanks to a relative who worked as a pilot, so I had access to buddy passes and could fly standby. I started flying back to Alaska every few weeks just to see Dien. Once people found out, friends from our old circle would gush things like, oh my god, you and Dien? I always hoped you two would end up together, you're perfect. It was cheesy, sure, but it actually felt nice to hear. It matched the dream I'd secretly held onto for so long. Back in school, I'd always avoided dating classmates because I didn't want drama or rumors messing with my life or my education. So this was kind of the romantic payoff to years of quiet patience. After several months of long-distance visits, Dien proposed to me. I said yes without a second thought. Right away, I started making arrangements to move back to Alaska and build a life with him in our hometown. I began packing up my things, sending them in parcels ahead of me. Thankfully, I didn't own much since I was still young and didn't have any real furniture. We planned for me to move into his place, which he shared with a roommate. That guy, let's call him Bicycle Man, or BM for short, would become unforgettable for reasons I'll explain soon. Right before my final flight back to Anchorage, I started feeling off. I was sluggish and weirdly emotional. My gut told me something was up, so I took a pregnancy test. It came back positive. I was over the moon. I couldn't wait to tell Dien. That night, I called him, but there was already a party happening at his place. I told him I had something important to share, but before I could say anything, he cut in and started going on about some cool artist chick he'd just met at the party. He kept raving about her. Let's call her THOT. Yes, it's a terrible nickname, but it made me laugh when I first thought of it, and I don't feel like being creative with acronyms. The way he talked about her immediately made my stomach turn. It didn't feel like the right time to share my news, so I held back and just said something like, don't do anything you'll regret. He told me to call him later, so I agreed and hung up. When I called back later that night, someone else answered the phone. They said Dien was there, but couldn't come to the phone. Right then, that awful sinking feeling hit me. I already had a gut sense of what was happening. Dien never returned my call that night. I tried again in the morning. Still no answer. That evening, I finally got a hold of him. I reminded him I had news, but before I could speak, he blurted out that he had something to tell me, and my sinking feeling turned to nausea. He admitted he'd cheated on me, with THOT, during the same party, while I'd been calling him, heart full and ready to share that we were going to be parents. I hung up and ran to the bathroom to throw up. He didn't call back. Didn't ask what my news was. Didn't care. Later, I called him again just to rip into him. He begged for forgiveness, said it was a mistake, told me he still wanted me to come to Alaska and be with him. I told him that marrying him was officially off the table. What he did wasn't a slip-up. It was a choice. A deliberate, selfish choice. I told him I'd come to get my things, and then I'd be gone. That was it. That same week, I miscarried. The emotional weight of it all nearly crushed me. I had been ready to start a life with this man I'd secretly loved for years, and it turned out he never truly meant any of it. On top of that heartbreak, I lost my first pregnancy. And I still had to fly back to Alaska just before Christmas to collect all my things I'd already shipped to him. I had nowhere else to go but his house. I was going to have to face him. Be around him. Pretend like I hadn't just been destroyed. I also knew that everyone, mutual friends, family, would eventually find out what happened, either through the truth or whatever spin Dien decided to put on it. I wasn't sure if he'd try to lie to save face. I used to think he wasn't the type, but clearly I never really knew him. So, I got on that flight to Anchorage. Of course, he didn't show up to pick me up. Even though we'd spoken the day before and he said he would. Either he forgot or just didn't think it was important anymore. Whatever the reason, it was gutting to be left there at the airport, feeling completely abandoned. An older couple noticed me standing there alone and asked if I was okay. That broke me. I started crying and couldn't stop. I didn't even have it in me to be polite, I just waved them off, completely overwhelmed. Eventually, I got a cab and headed to his place. I stood outside knocking until my hands went numb from the cold. Finally, the noise woke up Bicycle Man. He let me in. And there was Dien, passed out in bed, dead to the world. I ended up crashing on the couch in the living room, just sitting there in silence, not knowing how or even if I should confront him. After that phone call where he admitted everything, I figured there wasn't much left to say. He already knew how shattered I was. I decided right then that I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me as the crazy ex. No way was I letting his selfish decisions taint my character or make me look unstable. So, I played it cool. Detached. Like it was all just an unfortunate but simple end to our relationship. I kept to myself as much as I could. And somehow, Dien took that as a cue that we were just casual old friends, nothing serious ever happened between us. As if we hadn't just been engaged. As if I hadn't been flying back and forth to see him. As if I hadn't been planning a life with him. Then he pulled one of the most tone-deaf stunts imaginable, he invited her over. Yep, he actually brought THOT around to meet me. Turned out, he had told her I was just some friend visiting. He never mentioned we'd been in a relationship. Never told her about the engagement, my visits, the move, the whole reason I was even in Alaska. He completely wiped me from his narrative. Just erased me. Looking back, it's textbook narcissistic behavior. First, they idealize you, then devalue you, and finally, toss you aside like you never mattered. Those 2 weeks felt like an emotional prison. I was either crying silently or feeling like my insides were collapsing from grief. I had turned my entire life upside down for this man. My entire family had relocated to the Pacific Northwest, and I gave up my job to move back to Alaska to be with him. At the time, it didn't feel like a sacrifice, it felt like love. But in the aftermath, I realized I had abandoned people and a life that had never hurt me, for someone who crushed me completely. When word spread that Dien and I had broken up, our mutual friends and even his family were baffled. Everyone could tell I was devastated, but nobody really knew what to do about the constant, quiet stream of tears I carried around like a shadow. I still kept up the not crazy ex performance, doing my best to hold it together in front of people who had known us for years. They didn't get it. They were stunned that he had moved on with THOT so fast, and just as confused by the whole situation. But they eventually started piecing things together on their own. When people asked me what happened, I only gave the facts. Yeah, Diane's with her now. I'm here to get my stuff, ship it out, and catch a flight home. That was it. Nothing dramatic. No stories. Just the truth, stripped down and sharp. One day, remember him, Diane's roommate, walked out of his room and saw me sitting there, eyes red, face puffy from crying in silence. He just looked at me and said, "Diane's a total asshole. If I were you, I'd be crying too." It was the first time anyone acknowledged my pain in a way that didn't feel like pity. Was a big, tough guy, and for him to say that made me feel seen, like maybe the world wasn't entirely heartless after all. Still, I hadn't told a soul about the pregnancy. Or the miscarriage. That grief was something I carried alone. I knew that if I mentioned it, people would either think I was lying or using it to guilt him. I didn't need more pain on top of what I was already dealing with. So I perfected the skill of crying without making a sound. I became a ghost in that house, quiet, grieving, and invisible. Throughout those 2 weeks, Dien kept inviting THOT over like it was no big deal. Like her presence wouldn't wreck me. He didn't even think about what that might do to me. I was still numb, in complete disbelief that someone I trusted for so long could treat me like this. I slept on the couch while they laughed, drank, and did God knows what in his room, just a few feet away. I could hear everything. It was disgusting, cruel, sociopathic, honestly. And the fact that he didn't see a problem with it told me everything I needed to know about who he really was. At some point, I stopped wanting closure. I just wanted to hurt him. I was so filled with rage and betrayal that I started planning how to burn his little fantasy life to the ground. This is where the revenge kicks in. Now, I'm bisexual, and I knew that THOT, at the very least, was open-minded. And judging by how quickly she jumped into bed with Dien, it was obvious she didn't mind moving fast. So during one of their regular party nights, which were basically the norm at that house, I made my move. I caught THOT before she got too drunk and managed to get her alone. We ended up in Diane's bedroom. Yep, his room. The rest of the house was full of people drinking and not paying attention, and Diane himself was too busy entertaining guests to notice we had slipped away. And yeah, we hooked up. Afterward, I sat there with her and, in the coldest, most detached tone I could manage, told her the truth. I laid it all out, why I was really in Alaska, the history between me and Diane, our engagement, the pregnancy, the betrayal. I didn't cry. I didn't get emotional. I didn't raise my voice. I just gave her the facts. If he could propose to me and still cheat with you the same night I called to share our pregnancy, what do you think he'll do to you? That hit her like a ton of bricks. Suddenly it made sense to her why I'd been distant and cold when we first met. She had absolutely no idea who I really was to him. She didn't know I'd moved to Alaska for him. She didn't know I was waiting for boxes. She didn't know anything. And she felt terrible. You could see it in her face. She'd been played, just like I had. She hadn't been malicious, just clueless. And because I hadn't made a scene or screamed or trashed the place, she never suspected there was anything deeper going on. In private, I told her everything, even the fact that I'd been in love with Diane since I was 12, because I was too young and stupid to know better. At one point, Diane walked in and saw us together. But since we weren't arguing or crying or tearing the room apart, he must have assumed nothing was wrong. Maybe he was too drunk to register anything. Either way, there was no confrontation. The party kept going, and THOT left the next day. Later, Diane asked me what the hell I was doing with her. I looked him dead in the face and said, she was an easy lay. I'm not surprised you nailed her the day you met her, I just wanted to see what the hype was about. For the record, I didn't really think that about her. I said it because I knew it would crush him in the exact way he deserved. The look on his face said it all. He looked like his ego had deflated, and his manhood shriveled into nothing. He didn't say a word after that, just changed the subject, completely humiliated. I kept my face blank. He didn't deserve even a hint of how much satisfaction I got from that moment. Eventually, my stuff arrived, and I shipped everything back. I got on a flight and left Alaska behind, for good. I never saw THOT again. And Diane? I didn't hear from him for 5 whole years. By then, I was married and had just found out I was pregnant again. Life had moved on. Then, out of nowhere, an email from him popped into my inbox. He tracked me down through social media, this was back in 2005, and wanted to catch up. I figured I'd take the call, maybe to gloat, maybe just to see what kind of miserable spiral he'd ended up in. He told me all about how karma hit him hard after I left, and said, "You didn't lose it while you were here." He never actually said the words, "You destroyed my life," but it was pretty close. I remember him using the word cancer at some point, like something I did had infected everything. Maybe my quiet revenge, born out of the grief of losing a child, stirred up more than karma, maybe something darker stepped in and handled the rest. Here's how the dominoes fell, in order. THOT, the girl he threw everything away for, cheated on him with his best friend, then moved in with that guy just 2 weeks after I left Alaska. Ouch. Then, on Christmas Eve of all days, he got fired from his job. His boss was another mutual friend, and when word got around about how he treated me, that friend decided he didn't want Diane working at his video store anymore. Ouch again. Next, his truck broke down right in front of an electrical station and got impounded. He couldn't afford to get it out since he was already jobless. So he lost his transportation too. And that's a big deal when you live in the middle of a freezing Alaskan winter. Then came the real kicker, his own family caught wind of what happened between us and cut him off completely. Just like that, he was disowned. I never found out exactly what version of the story they heard, but it was enough to burn that bridge completely. I chalked it up to karma. After THOT was out of the picture, his remaining friends, because of course, the guy still had people around, decided to throw another party. But this one didn't end in fun. They got Diane blackout drunk, beat the hell out of him, dragged him outside, and tossed him into a snowbank. Then they locked the door and left him out there. He ended up crashing with a neighbor. But not long after, he had to leave the state entirely. Everyone had turned their backs on him. No job. No family. No truck. No girlfriend. No friends. Nothing left. Just an empty shell of a guy who burned every bridge and salted the earth behind him. When he finally reached out to me years later, he was living in Texas. He said he'd been reflecting a lot on his life, trying to make sense of everything that happened, and wanted to catch up after all this time. That's when I decided to finally tell him what I never got the chance to say, that I'd been pregnant when everything fell apart. And that's when he broke. I mean, really broke. He started crying. Full on, couldn't catch his breath, sobbing over the phone. And I told him, plain and simple, how much it had hurt to feel like I wasn't even allowed to tell him back then because I knew he'd just see me as some crazy, bitter ex trying to make him feel guilty. He choked out, "I had no idea you were pregnant." And even though I was furious all over again, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I kept my voice calm and flat, like I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. "Well," I said, "we had sex, didn't we? So it wasn't exactly impossible. I tried to tell you," I continued. "But you were too focused on confessing your betrayal. You didn't stop to ask what my news was. You didn't care enough to find out." He started crying harder, apologizing over and over, more than I've ever heard from anyone in my life. It felt like he was trying to empty his guilt through the phone line, hoping it would fix something. I wrapped the call up with grace, not bitterness. I told him, "It's okay. I don't hate you." What I wanted to say was, "I pity you." But I held that part back. I've moved on. I'm married now, and we just found out we're expecting our first child. Things are better for me. Then I ended the call with something like, "It was nice catching up. Sorry life's been rough for you. Take care." We never spoke again. I don't even know why he reached out in the first place. Maybe he needed to confess something. Maybe he wanted to see if I still cared. But I doubt he expected to learn that he could have been a father, that we could have had a family, if he hadn't been so recklessly selfish. Looking back, I now know that whole relationship wasn't love. It was me confusing charm and attention and teenage longing for something real. I spent so much time blaming myself, wondering what I did wrong to make him treat me like that. But the truth is, it had nothing to do with me. None of it. He didn't hurt me to punish me. He didn't betray me because of some flaw I had. He did it because he was only ever thinking about himself. It took me years to learn how to spot narcissistic behavior. But now, with time and clarity, I see exactly what I avoided. I narrowly escaped a life with someone who didn't know how to feel real empathy, someone who couldn't own his damage until it came back to crush him. And my revenge? It didn't come from screaming, or fighting, or breaking things. It came from maintaining my grace. From staying calm. From stating only the facts, keeping my feelings hidden just long enough to quietly ruin his shiny new relationship and plant a seed of doubt in the woman he thought was his next big thing. 5 years after he shattered me, he sobbed on the phone like a broken man. And I took that satisfaction, bottled it up, and poured it over the imaginary grave of the child we never got to meet. "I'm sorry, baby.